Howdy, friends, and thanks for joining us here today. We are excited to have you, and more importantly, I think we're just excited for the World Cup that is starting next week. So, wanted to spend the next hour with you. First of all and foremost, welcome to Off Your Game, how climate change could slow down the 2026 World Cup. Over the next hour, we're going to walk you through the science behind our latest analysis to understand how heat trapping pollution is driving the odds of performance impairing heat during the tournament. We'll get into which matches are most at risk, what hot temperatures mean for players' health and match strategy. And we'll also be debuting a brand new interactive hub that went live today that will help guide you through the data from today to the very first match next week, all the way to June 19th and the championship match that is being held in New Jersey. We don't know which two teams will be standing on the pitch yet, but we already know how much heat could be a factor for whichever two teams get there. And personally, I think what I'm most excited for today, we have lined up later. We're going to be hearing directly from two professional soccer players about what it's actually like when the heat becomes as much of an opponent as much as the team is on the other side of the pitch. My name is Shel Winkley. I'm a senior engagement specialist and meteorologist here at Climate Central. For those of you who may not be familiar, maybe this is your first webinar with Climate Central, we're a nonprofit, non-advocacy organization dedicated to researching and reporting about our changing climate. At Climate Central, we develop and distribute broadcast and publish-ready climate content and data for your storytelling and communication. I want to note that everything you see on climatecentral.org, everything that is tied to this report and to our interactive hub is 100% free to use for your reporting and your storytelling. This briefing is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed to everyone after the call. As a reminder, again, any of these resources are free and available for you to use not only in your reporting, but maybe it's just talks with colleagues, with friends, with families, and especially social media. If you do use it for social, we'd love for you to tag us at Climate Central. Everything presented today is on the record, so you can use it for your reporting as well. And then after our presentations, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a Q&A feature. The chat is disabled for this, but you can use that Q&A box and we will get to those questions towards the end of the hour. Okay, today's webinar, you're going to hear from a couple different folks. Jasmine Spencer and Alex Jacob, both are professional soccer players who will meet in just a bit. We have Tom DiLiberto with us. He is our media director and a meteorologist here at Climate Central. He's helping to run the chat and monitor your questions, but we'll also have him pop in a bit to give you a first look at that Climate Central World Cup Interactive Hub. But first, let me introduce you to Caitlin Trudeau, applied climate scientist here at Climate Central, who was part of the team that worked on this analysis. In fact, both of the analysis that we have released around the World Cup. So as we get started, if you haven't had a chance to catch the latest release for the World Cup, we're adding that to the chat right now. The first is a look at 16 host cities across North America and the warming that they've experienced since the first time a tournament was held in North America back in 1970, and for some of us since the last World Cup here in North America in the 1990s. The second, again, the report that came out today, looking at the odds of performance impairing heat that will be part of the upcoming matches while looking at it through an attribution science lens to understand how much of that is due to climate change. That'll be it for me for right now. So to kick things off, Caitlin, let's get into the science and the data.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Shel. Thanks, everyone, for coming today. My name's Caitlin Trudeau. I am an applied climate scientist here at Climate Central. And I've been here about 7.5, 8 years now. But like Shel said, I helped work on this analysis. And just, again, want to just mention to the team, the huge amount of work has been done on this, and especially the information hub today. So really excited to be a part of this today. Okay, so jumping right into it, we have 16 World Cup host cities and stadiums that we looked at all across, the US, Canada, and Mexico. And we wanted to just kind of understand what the impact of heat was in these areas and the role of climate change. And so we basically broke it up into two different analyses. The first one just looked at the frequency of extremely hot days, basically in June, July, since the 1970s, and we wanted to see how frequently those happened and where they were most common. We also wanted to see which locations have seen the largest increases. And then that kind of gives us this background and then that provides us information for the second analysis, which is really looking at the probability that each scheduled match will have this kind of performance impairing heat. Um, so for the first one, for both of them, just a little bit about the methodology. Both of these analyses use our climate shift index system. It's a global daily temperature attribution system. It's based on observational data and climate models. And it basically helps you answer the question, has climate change impacted the frequency or severity of today's temperature anywhere in the world on any given day? And really what it's doing is it's comparing something in two different worlds. So we compare the probability of temperature in our world where we have, a lot of carbon pollution, and then we compare it to a world where we take all that out. And so what would the probability be in a world without carbon pollution? And that's just basically the ratio we're comparing the probability with and without that carbon pollution. So for the first analysis, so we looked at the frequency of extremely hot June-July days since 1970. And we define an extremely hot day as any day with an average temperature that's above the 90th percentile for local temperatures. You can think of it as basically has to be in the top 10% hottest days. And we compared that to, our frequency in our observed world to a frequency in a world without climate change. We did this for all 16 host cities. And we also looked for repeat host cities. There are about 10 of them. We compared the average number of these days in the decade leading up to the last time that they hosted, and then compared it to the decade leading up to now. And so for the US, the last time was 1994, and in Mexico, 1986. So this is kind of this first one. So extremely hot June-July days are on the rise at nearly all stadiums. So 14 out of 16 host stadiums. You can see Dallas's example here on the right. 49% of all of these days experienced since 1970 are due to human-caused climate change, which means they're linked to pollution from burning coal, oil, and gas. So a huge amount of these days, basically half of them, wouldn't have happened in a world without climate change. And at 12 stadiums, at least 1 in 3 extremely hot days wouldn't have occurred without climate change. When we looked at this, the 10 repeat host cities, on average, the repeat host cities see 3 times as many extremely hot days now compared to the last time that they hosted. These were most common in places like Mexico City, Miami, Houston, and Guadalajara. And so for the second analysis, I had never heard of performance impairing heat before, but it is based on this paper that looked at how temperature affects player performance during the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. And they actually found that there's very observable declines in key metrics. It's usually when the temperature exceeds 28 degrees Celsius or 82.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And really what they noticed most was that it really had an impact on how fast, how far, or how frequently players were able to run. So for this analysis, we also used our climate shift index system, and we analyzed the likelihood that daily temperatures would exceed this performance impairing threshold for each of the 104 World Cup matches. And then we compared the odds in today's carbon polluted world to a world without carbon pollution, and we identified how much climate change influenced those odds. And so we found 97 out of 104 scheduled matches are more likely to see performance impairing heat due to climate change. On average, climate change boosted the odds about 8 percentage points across all matches, and at least 49 matches have at least a 50% likelihood of this performance impairing heat. And the climate change's best single match impact was or is going to be June 26th in Guadalajara, where the odds of performance impairing heat are as high as 70%, and climate change increased that by 37 percentage points. So a pretty huge impact there for climate change. And just kind of summing up why this all matters. Obviously, extreme heat really impacts our health, especially players, but also people who attend the matches, people who are working the matches. And when you have really hot, humid heat, it can really overwhelm your body and affect the ability for you to cool yourself down. That can lead to all kinds of obvious health impacts. And this kind of heat doesn't just affect health, it also changes match strategy and the style of play. And as we continue into the future with continued carbon pollution, it's going to get harder to safely hold events like this when they're outdoors and they're during times of extreme heat. And it's also worth mentioning that extreme heat is not the only type of extreme weather that's impacting large sporting events like the World Cup. And we'll likely see the real-time consequences of this of a warming world during the 2026 World Cup. So I think, we're going to give you more about the tool and kind of dig into the numbers, but I think that is it for me.
Thanks, Caitlin. I think one question before we let you take a break for a second. Was there anything in the data that really just kind of, I don't know, blew your mind, like stood out the most to you?
I think what kind of always gets me when I look at our climate shift index data is seeing that in the 1970s, there really weren't any of these days in most locations. Like it was like non-existent. And I think you see that in Miami. Like you see that really most, not all the days now are due to climate change. And this wasn't something that was frequently experienced or experienced at all during this June, July period. So just since the 1970s, you really see this dramatic change where we've really pushed ourselves into a new climate. Like we were totally outside the boundaries of what we experienced in the 70s. So I think that's one thing that always gets me when I use our climate shift index data.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate that. Again, all of what Caitlin just told you about is in the report. If you have questions that are specific for her, drop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them in just a bit. Caitlin, appreciate you. All right. So we want to make sure that you had a platform that you could access this data. There's a lot, right? There's a lot of matches. There's a lot of different ways you can look at it, be it from a match angle, a team angle, a stadium and a city angle. So we wanted to give you something at your fingertips that you'd be really able to use very quickly, and the way that you want to use it through the World Cup. Not only that, but we have an easy way for you to find that information. It's really just kind of one of those things where there's graphics, there's data, any which way you want to cut it. So live right now and ready for you to bookmark is the Climate Central World Cup Hub. Link just went into the chat. And for that, we'll bring in Tom DiLiberto, who will give you a quick tour of this new tool. Tom.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the tool. So this year, you're looking right now at the home page. So if you go to that link that was just put into the chat, you will be coming to here, climatecentral.org, world-cup-2026. Make sure you bookmark this. This is off your game, how climate change can slow down the 2026 World Cup. And the amazing thing about this informational hub is that no matter what you're interested in related to the World Cup, there is a place for you to go here. So not only right here in the very top page, you can go see the data by team, by the stadium, by the match, no matter what you're looking at. So you can just click in there, write whatever you would like to write. So if you want to write, let's say, New York, there you go. There's your New York, New Jersey stadium. But you can see here as it fills out, you could also take a look at the New Zealand games. You could take a look at very specific matches. But if I scroll down here, I'm going to give you a quick little run through some of the really cool stuff available on this tool. We also will have this part right there on the homepage, taking a look at the matches most influenced by climate change this week. This will be updated as the World Cup is ongoing. So not only are we taking a look at all that information that Caitlin mentioned, but we'll also be taking into account what the forecast actually is for what the temperatures will actually be and providing that extra context so folks will know what are the games that you might be expecting to see that might be dealing with some either extreme heat, extreme humidity, or both. And you can see here right now we have a couple of the friendlies out there that are going to be taking place soon. So not necessarily the World Cup games. Yes, just a couple of friendlies in the run up here to the World Cup. You scroll down some more. This is where you can also explore the different teams. We also have a how to read this data. So you can click on Learn How. It'll explain what those graphs actually are. And you can basically see all these sorts of things right there and easy to go. So if I clicked, for instance, on Argentina, I can go back again to show that. Just click right there in Argentina. You can get the climate story for Argentina. Not only does it give you what their FIFA ranking is for all those soccer nerds out there, but as well as what group they're in, how many matches and what stadiums they're playing in. But you can take a look down here and get a sense about what exactly those statistics are for their games. So you can see what is the chance of performance impairing heat at game one, Argentina versus Algeria at Kansas City Stadium at 8 for this game on June 16th. So you can see here that, again, this is looking at the hottest part of the day. there's about a 68% chance of performance impairing heat, of which 13% is been added due to climate change. You can also see here the links for the other two games as well. Whether the stadium itself has been climate controlled. You can see here the next two games there in Dallas are in a stadium that is climate controlled. You keep scrolling down. Now you can click on these, which will lead you right to a match page, give you information on that. But before I do that, I want to go down a little bit further. The path to the final. You get a sense about what does their heat journey, what does Argentina's heat journey look like if they're trying to repeat as World Cup champions. You can see here, looking at this chance of heat conditions that could slow player performance, you can now see that if they're the winner of their group stage, if they come in second in their group stage, and because there's a lot of different potential outcomes for if they come in third, we just chose one third place qualification path to the finals that they can potentially take. But here in one chart, you have each country's journey to the finals of the World Cup and what that looks like in terms of performance impairing heat. So not only you have that chances as it's just here for the total number, you can click on this toggle up here. You can get that just in terms of how much climate change has added. You can click this little tab here to account for the stadium type, for the ones that are climate controlled, all providing really useful information if you want to share this on social media or tell that full story as these countries are making their way through the 2026 World Cup. Not only that, you go down, we have shareable graphics taking into account about what their matches look like each country, as well as that path to the finals. And then you can, again, of course, if you're curious what that looks like for the other teams in their group, you can do the same thing there. I mentioned here, if you go click on the left, you can do the same thing for the stadiums. Just if you go here now, let's say to Kansas City Stadium. You can get a sense not only of what the heat trends now are at each venue that's hosting a World Cup game, how many extremely hot days there are, how many of those days have been added by climate change, as well as taking a look at the numbers for each game that's going to be played at that venue throughout the World Cup, not including the group stage, but also including the knockout rounds. And you have a shareable graphic based on the venue as well as some additional tools that you want to dig into the local climate and climate impacts for Kansas City. You can do that. You want to take a look at the Missouri $1 billion disaster summary. You can do that as well, too. So give you the full context about what to expect at the venue itself during the games. Now, there are a lot of games. 104 games of the World Cup to come, and you can get information on every single one of them. Here's a tournament overview. You can see here all of the group games from Group A all the way to Group L for every game during the group stage. Similar sort of thing for the journeys there. You can change it to climate change to those numbers, as well as accounting for stadium type. But you can also take a look at the knockout rounds. We got your bracket right here. And you can take a look at what those numbers are for each potential game and where they're located during the knockout rounds. The final thing I'll mention, if all of this, you say it's a lot of information, where can I go to get more information about what this all means? Click on the About This Hub. We have links for how to understand all of this information, what to do, any questions you might add. And you want to make sure, too, that during the World Cup, we will have weekly updates about what's happened, what you can expect to happen, and you can sign up way down here, receive weekly heat updates during the tournament. This will get you an up-to-date weekly information about what to expect in the upcoming week at the World Cup, but also what's happened already. And I'll stop there.
Okay, before we let you go, Tom, one question for you. We've got a couple questions in the Q&A, so we'll just jump into it now. So, yeah, there are stadiums that are climate controlled, right? We know that some of the matches that will be played in those host cities have some really big climate signals, performance impairing heat, but then that was also added by climate change, much like the games that will be played in Dallas. So can you help us understand, like, yes, those matches will be played in an air-conditioned venue, but how does this information help? Like, how does it inform us for everything else that goes along with those matches?
Yeah, so there's two different aspects to think about this. We have the player performance, right? And they're going to be playing inside these stadiums that might be climate controlled too, but there's also the fan experience. We know that there are going to be a lot of people going to Dallas to go watch this game, and they are going to be experiencing potential this sort of heat before they even make it into the stadium. We also know there are watch parties set up in all of these different cities. There are all sorts of events occurring in all of the cities that are hosting World Cup games. So even though necessarily that the stadium itself might be climate controlled, we know that there's still going to be thousands and thousands of people heading to environments where they might be experiencing extreme heat. So you can see here just the heat trends at Dallas Stadium is significant. Uh, Influence from climate change on the most extremely hot days felt at that. So you have the player performance aspect, but you also have the fan experience aspect, both of which can be potentially drastically impacted by extreme heat fueled by climate change.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody yesterday. You're talking if you're from Dallas and you have experienced Texas heat in June and July, maybe you'll be acclimated. But we have a lot of visitors that are coming to these cities who could be coming from cooler climates and aren't ready for that kind of heat to be coming at them. So very helpful. All right, we will put Tom back in the box for now. We'll see him again at the Q&A part. And again, if you have questions, feel free to use that Q&A function. Okay, so numbers and data help us understand how climate change is impacting play, but it's stories from the pitch that really help us understand what it actually feels like. What are these athletes actually dealing with as they're out there in this extreme heat? The strain, the adjustment, what's going through athletes' minds when they're competing in an increasingly hotter world. I want to bring in two friends into the conversation who can speak exactly to that. First, we have with us Jasmine Spencer, a Long Island native and University of Maryland grad who has spent over a decade playing professional soccer. She gave 12 years to the NWSL before joining the Vancouver Rise in 2025 and helping them win their inaugural Northern Super League Championship, which, by the way, congratulations, Jazz. Beyond the pitch, Jasmine serves as an executive board, on the executive board, rather, of the Black Women's Player Collective and is founder of Jazz It Up, a sustainable lifestyle brand focused on uplifting communities, empowering youth, and protecting the environment. I also want to introduce you to Alex Jacobs, a professional footballer who has wrapped up a season in the Jamaican Premier League with Harbor View Football Club. Alex brings a perspective from a part of the world where heat is not a future concern, it's a present reality on the pitch each and every week. Welcome to you both. Really glad you're here and really looking forward to the perspective that you can help bring to this conversation and really help bring the data to life. So I think my first question for either of you, whoever wants to take it first, let's talk about the first time that you really felt it. Like that first time you had a specific moment on the pitch where heat wasn't just uncomfortable, but it was actually felt like it was changing the way you were playing, or maybe you, as you were running back and forth, you maybe realized like, oh, this is different, and the strain is being felt on me.
Um, I feel like the example that I have that comes to mind actually didn't directly involve me, but there was a player in the league. The game was at 3 p.m. in Houston, because of TV rights. That was the mandated kickoff time. And she actually passed out from heat exhaustion on live TV during the game. And I feel like that's the first time where I was like, at what cost, to players. And I feel like I bring that up as an example ahead of the World Cup because at what cost? Heat is always a factor. It's going to be a factor. I can tell you, and I'm sure Alex can, a million examples of like what it feels like to be out there. But when you're witnessing a heat exhaustion episode happen to someone else, and there's like nothing you can do about it, it's really scary. And it becomes bigger than like this exciting sporting event. So like this is like a real serious issue, not just in sport, but also from like a health perspective as well.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Jazz just said. Personally, like when I think about playing in heat, the very first memory that comes to mind was back when I was like a little kid. It was the only time I ever felt like I couldn't breathe in my life. I don't struggle with asthma normally, but I remember playing in a game, it was really hot, and I felt like my throat closing, and I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't run, obviously. Um, and it was one of the scariest moments in my life, and the referee helped me, like, he gave me advice on how to um, kind of like resume breathing properly. But then in my adult life, I think the first time I can remember thinking it's too hot to play was, I can't remember what age I was, but it was in New York, and New York can get very hot in the summer. And it was probably right around noon. It was like probably the hottest part of the day. And I could barely think, I could barely run. I just remember feeling like every time I thought I need to make this run, I need to sprint, I need to track this player, I I really didn't want to. And even if I pushed myself to, like I knew I was not running as quickly as I could. I felt like I was running through thick air. So it just made it very, very, very onerous and difficult, physically and mentally.
Is there anything happening for either of you? Is there anything happening in the background, like, maybe the way that you're preparing for a match that is going to be in a hotter than what you would expect environment, or as you're on the pitch and you're feeling these impacts? Is there something that us as fans aren't seeing that's happening on the sideline to try to make sure the worst doesn't come of that heat, essentially?
I mean, just that last bit of what I mentioned, the physical and the mental aspect, that mental aspect is invisible to fans watching, or I would guess it's pretty much invisible unless you have an intimate experience with playing at a very high level, um, and you can like look for cues, but that mental aspect is pretty much invisible, and that is happening. I wouldn't even say in the background. It's We're constantly making decisions. I'm constantly making decisions on the field, and the heat and extreme heat absolutely affects my ability to make those decisions while I want to execute those decisions with my body physically. So like those two like processes are exhausting, and the heat just makes it um, that much harder to think and to execute successfully.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the mental piece of it, because that was really going to be my next question. Jazz, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. Just, do you talk about it like as a team, or as just, maybe players that you are more friendly with than others on the team? Do you talk about that together? Do you talk about climate change? Do you talk about how heat is impacting the game or could impact the match that's coming up?
Yeah, I think like at the end of the day, our job is to win. And so like this is a factor that could inhibit or help um, your ability to win. And so like it's anytime we're playing in a market that is known to be hot, like a Houston or an Orlando, um, in the summer, like the preparation is kind of like as soon as the schedule comes out. Like I'm in these markets at this time of year, like I know this is gonna heat is gonna be an additional factor that we're up against. Like what are we going to do to prepare to be successful? And there's like so much science around like different ways. I've been on teams where the week leading into the game, we mandatory are training in like rain jackets and sweats and like hats to try to mimic like what our body would feel like at elevated temperatures running around. So like you might pass training and be like, these people are crazy. Like it's already 80 plus degrees out. Why are they training in long sleeves and layers? Well, it's to try to acclimate as best you can to perform in that environment. And then I've been on the other side where I've played in Houston and we're in that environment all the time to like you think it's a advantage, like you would be used to it, but we're actually depleting our body every day. And so it's a different lens of like, well, how do I have to recover? Because I've been in this heat 5 extra days, weeks, months than the team that's coming in for 48 hours and leaving. And so there's so many different strategies that you try to implement to just perform for 90, maybe 100 minutes in one day to get a result that is really important to your season or your tournament, etc. But the preparation starts well before kickoff time in order to try to be prepared. And I mean, I have felt terrible in both those situations at some point. Like you get to the 75th minute and you're just gassed. And I'm like, I don't know that running around in that rain jacket for 5 days was even worth it because I still feel horrible right now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm a big college sports guy, and the team that I root for were really obnoxious and were really loud. So I know other teams have piped in noise to try to help with that, but I've never thought about it in terms of, yeah, adding layers while you're practicing or while you're preparing in order to try to get ahead of the heat and get your body acclimated to that. Um, yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's talk more about the adaptations. Like, are there any other than that, like any strategies that are happening, or maybe just like, I don't know, like maybe it's a cooler environment than what you prepared for? Is there any in-match things that are happening in order to alleviate some of this heat? Like, do you see more people get subbed out? Like, can you flag down a coach or the sideline and just be like, hey, I need a break? Or like, what is it like when you're out there and you're feeling that heat in real time? Basically, do you have an exit strategy if you need an exit strategy off the pitch?
I'm sure Jazz can speak about this. I feel like the first thing that comes to mind for me, I mean, I just spent the last year in Jamaica, and Jamaica is hot. Um, and it's what I heard from my teammates. That was my first year in Jamaica. What I heard from my teammates who were born and raised, grew up and playing in Jamaica for years, is that this last year, like the heat, the hot period of the year, lasted longer and was hotter. That was just their experience. And during games, you know, players, I think we call these the dark arts of football, like moments where you can slow the game down. Um, if the goalkeeper needs some attention, it's a good opportunity for players to get some water, some ice, and just a moment to get their breath from the sidelines. So um, these are tools that players and teams around the world use, and I've seen it used personally. So yeah, in the course of a match, like we will use kind of anything within the legal bounds of the game to cope and to adapt.
I was going to hold this for Q&A, but I think I want to ask it now because I think that's a really good point. And Jazz and I talked a little bit about this cooling breaks, right? So a lot of people have brought up the extreme heat that's to be expected because it is summertime in the North America. Um, and then we've obviously shifted for some of our cities. We've moved matches into these climate controlled areas. One of the big things that FIFA has said multiple times is like, oh, they've established these like mandatory cooling breaks during the matches, but that's just a couple of minutes inside of this bigger match where you're running back and forth. So I think the question here is, are they effective? Is it helpful to get those cooling breaks?
Um, Personally, I don't like the cooling breaks, because the 3 minutes that you're allotted is not a significant time for me to regulate my body temperature before having to repeat the exertion that I have to do. And it's not like those 3 minutes are like they disappear. The way, soccer works is they're just added on in stoppage time. So instead of me playing that 45 minutes straight, I'm now playing 48 minutes. They're just tacked on to the back end of the half. And I had a chance to get some water in between, but like sometimes it feels worse because when you're locked in and you're in it and you're running around and you're, I guess, could be like the zone to some capacity, like you're not feeling it because you're using all of your mental power to like stay in the game. And then when you take the water break, it brings you back to holy, it is hot. And that, for me personally, is a really difficult moment to work through. Whereas I would prefer to just go straight through and have halftime. When you add in VAR and other stoppages, normal stoppages in the game, there's always an injury or, anything. Stoppage time is getting 7, 8 minutes already in the first half. So regulation time in the last couple of years has gone from like 92 minutes with stoppage time to like games aren't really shorter than 100 minutes anymore. And so adding these water breaks to me like are kind of like a in like good faith measure, but like you're still out there for sometimes a longer period of time. And they don't, it's not 3 minutes isn't sufficient enough to like really make a difference in what it feels like and what you still need to be able to do and, demand of your body.
Alex, if you don't have an answer, that's fine, but I'll leave it open for you if you, in case you want to add anything.
I would add like one thought, which is I feel like for me there's so much truth in what Jazz just said, like that 3 minute break. Um, Water it can be nice, or like a cold sponge can be nice as a temporary respite from like the heat, but yeah, it's not going to meaningfully cool you down. And I'm gonna harp on the mental bit here again, like, and even though it's a break from that flow state or that zone that Jazz touched on, you're still definitely receiving information from the coach or trying to work things out with your teammates. So it is an extension of the mental concentration, and that Jazz said like games are often 100 minutes plus at this point, including added time. And so adding like another 10 minutes on, it's a meaningful percentage of time where need to stay locked in mentally, and the mental bit is taxing. So that's another thing I would add, with the extension of time of the game, duration of the game.
Yeah, I think I've talked with both of you about this, but even with that stoppage time and that cooling break, as we're thinking about how we can use this data and how we can tell these stories around the World Cup, dummies like me are still sitting in the full sun. And most likely, if I'm watching a soccer match, I am not hydrating. I'm probably putting something into my body that is dehydrating me more than anything. So I think that that's a really important part too, is like for the fan experience as well. It's just a good reminder for us too, to like maybe catch some shade or drink a little bit of water in between maybe the other things that you're consuming at the games as well. I want to stay, and I'll put you in the spotlight for one more question, then we can move on. But I want to stay on that fan experience because I really want to understand, what do you want people to know? So for fans watching from home, a lot of them will be in maybe an air-conditioned living room while players are out there on the pitch really dealing with this heat. What's the one thing you wish they understood about what it's really like to compete in extreme heat? Because I think it's really easy when you're watching from the sidelines to get really upset when your team doesn't perform like you thought they would, or maybe when they lose a match. So, what do you want fans to know about that heat that you're feeling during these games?
I think I would want everyone to know that it's like it's a compounding factor. Like as you are interacting and supporting throughout the tournament and cheering for your team, like the expectation that we all as fans will have from game one to hopefully our team, makes it to the final is to win and is to play the best football they can. But the reality is after game one, the exertion that has been put on their body is going to bring them down here. And they're going to do everything they can to get back to baseline to repeat those performances. But the deeper they go into the tournament, the more that fatigue and the compounding effects of the heat is going to affect them. And it's funny because at that time, everybody is more invested and more critical. It's a knockout phase game, and my expectation as a fan is going to be even higher. I don't care that you played 4 games, in the span of 2 weeks. So I think just what I would love people supporting the athletes throughout the tournament to remember is just like take a second to think about how hot you might feel when you step outside one day and then apply the effort that they're putting for 100 plus minutes and know that they have to do that for 7 games to try to lift the trophy. And if you're complaining as well you should, because sometimes it's really hot outside. Just like have that moment of grace for your favorite player when they miss a pass or a shot on goal or a tackle, because like it's hard. The demand is hard, and it's even higher at that level because this is, this is we're about to watch the elite of the elite compete. Um, but it compounds game after game after game.
I would also say that in addition to the games that stack up within the World Cup, I can pretty safely say that every single player at the World Cup will have just finished up a 10-month season. Um, and seasons have only gotten more and more packed with matches in recent years. We see like just increased workload for players, shorter duration between matches. So you can bet that players and staff and teams are thinking about this, the workload that players have been exposed to before the tournament and then the workload during the tournament. Um, and yeah, that grace that Jazz talked about, like footballers are playing football and it is a game and it's the beautiful game, but it's also our jobs. And like anybody who has ever worked a job outdoors in the heat, it is harder in the heat. It's harder and like you're more prone to make mistakes. So imagine yourself out there on the pitch or just compare it to yourself if you ever worked a job outside or you walked outside or you walked up some steps in the heat. Um, it's like that, except probably magnified by 1,000 because you've got thousands or really like hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people eyes on you expecting the world from you. So yeah, grace.
Yeah, I honestly, I think beyond the heat, grace is just something that is good. Look, this is coming from probably one of the least athletic people that you're ever going to meet. I literally sat at the end of the bench and just passed out water in high school on my basketball team. So like, I think that's the biggest thing too, is just grace. There's a lot. There's the heat, but there's a lot of things happening all at once. And I think that's a great message, is just to remember that it is for the love of the game as well, even though everybody wants to get there. And as Tom showed a little earlier, you can use that World Cup Interactive Hub to really understand what it looks like for that path to get to New Jersey in mid to late July. So if you really want to understand the compounding heat that Jazz and Alex have talked about so much today, that's a really great way to use that tool. Okay, before we get to Q&A, and there's a lot of good questions that are in the box. Over the next few weeks as you cover the tournament, be that today or any point, we wanted to give you some clear language that you could use and you could share. So again, being on the record, Jazz and Alex have graciously provided a couple quotes that you can use in your coverage. So, Jazz, you can go first if you like. It's on the screen for you, but yeah, take it away.
Yeah, I think I have done my best to kind of express this throughout our conversation today, but it really is hard to explain to people how much extreme heat impacts performance. And now, when you add the fact that climate change is making these conditions more frequent, it's really important to have this knowledge that's available in the hub to put things into perspective of what that really is like out there on the field. So it's great, and I'm excited that we all have access to it.
Great, Alex.
Yeah, I'm thankful for all the work that Climate Central has done with that World Cup tool. It's remarkable and staggering. Um, and it's a good way to visualize like heat is not new, but extreme heat, which is made more likely by heat trapping pollution, driving climate change, very well could be a difference maker in this summer's edition of the biggest sporting event on the planet.
All right, appreciate you both. And again, those are direct quotes that you can use in your reporting. Okay, so I'll ask Caitlin and Tom come back on camera. Jazz and Alex, again, I can't thank you enough for being here, for giving us player perspective and help us understand. Again, numbers tell a big story, but it really helps to understand straight from the storytellers themselves. Okay, so in the next 10 minutes or so, get through some of these great questions we have here. I want to start with this one, which is coming from Stuart Goodall, who is asking, we talked about some of these adaptations. So, Alex, you mentioned like a cool sponge or maybe a towel on the back of your neck. But do you adopt any strategies to start a match with a lower core temperature? Or are there any key advantages for subs awaiting match entry that have that lower core temperature before they come into the game?
Honestly, nothing that comes to mind to like lower a core temperature. Um, I think about substitutes waiting to come on, and at least in Jamaica, where I was for the last year, there's not that much shielding from the heat, so those substitutes are sitting on a bench um, and staying warm. They're not moving around unless they start warming up, but they're still going to be warm. So leading up to the match, not really. It's probably an unsatisfying answer, but in my experience, um, maybe the one thing I would say is in terms of preparation, if we know that a game is going to be at 3:30, then we've trained at 3:30, at least like 2 days leading up to the match to just simulate, the conditions that we will experience at kickoff and try and acclimate.
Yeah, I feel like lowering your core temperature is like one aspect, but there's also just like how fast your muscle is being broken down in those like environments and therefore creating lactic acid, which is like another factor that like impairs performance. So a lot of preparation is less focused on internal body temperature and more on like nutrition to kind of prepare for the exertion. So that's like hydration, like intake of electrolytes. Um, Another thing that's like really popular is like drinking beet juice to get more nitrates in. So you're trying to hold on to your oxygen stores for a longer period of time. Like there's a lot of nutrition based strategies that you can try to use to help your body combat the exertion. But then you kind of bring back to what Alex has been talking about, that mental side of like, yeah, I'm doing everything so my body can survive, but like, can I keep my head right? Because I'm still feeling and experiencing the heat, even if I've done everything possible for my body to not pass out. Like physically, I can make it, but can I endure what I'm feeling mentally to continue to perform at the best of my ability? And that's where those marginal differences occur and can cost you results in a game.
Talk about nutrition. It reminds me of, any little league game you went to, they had a container of orange slices at the end. They're like, here, like it goes beyond that, obviously. Yeah. Okay. Another great question. This is coming in from Amanda Andrews. What do players think about the shifting of the season when matches are played? So specifically like the World Cup in Qatar. Is there any thoughts around shifting a season or maybe even, shifting the World Cup to a cooler time of the year? Is that even possible?
Um, I think there's mixed opinions. My opinion is kind of like where I entered the conversation is at what cost? Because the World Cup, while might be like the biggest sporting event on the planet, is once every 4 years. And, you know, professional footballers' livelihood is in the day-to-day, their domestic leagues, those competitions that happen annually. So shifting one tournament every 4 years to try to accommodate heat is unrealistic to the sport as a whole when, seasons are set for a reason for other climate things, like most of Europe plays the way they do based around the World Cup, yes, but there are some countries where you can't because it's like too cold, like it's snowing in February. Like, can you get on a pitch? Like in England, yeah, you can when you have millions of dollars invested and you have special surfaces that like defrost while the players are on there. But those are resources that aren't afforded to every country or federation across the world. So to try to move the global tournament to, fit a system that is like just not really built on everybody's domestic league would be really impossible. I know that it was done for the Qatar World Cup, but I don't think the players and the athletes that were involved in that were particularly happy about it because it was smack dab in the middle of their seasons, and the expectation for them to perform um, probably didn't fit what they're used to. So, yeah.
I would love to also add that it's a good question. Um, and I think Jazz hit the nail on the head with talking about, you know, there are domestic leagues around the entire planet, all with different climates. And so, yeah, we can shift the World Cup, but um, other players in certain countries will just feel the effects of that when their seasons are prolonged into, the corresponding season and climate. Um, so it's not a question really of if players will play in extreme heat. It's just who and when.
Uh, okay, so a question maybe for Tom and Caitlin. I think you can probably answer some of this as well. So we've talked a lot about heat today, but we know June and July in North America, especially here in the States, there's a lot of other weather that can happen. So another question we have is, are there any unexpected climate effects people should be aware of that could interact with the tournament itself?
One that comes to mind potentially, and Caitlin, you might want to talk about this, is wildfires. There could be wildfires out west, there could be wildfires elsewhere, and they could lead to there being smoke in a lot of these places, which leads into a whole nother situation if that actually happens, let alone if there is extreme rainfall events. You could imagine there being torrential downpours and flash flooding, which could put people at risk in a lot of these places. So, summer is an extreme time for weather. And we're only really talking about one aspect of it. And the World Cup is truly taking place in like every aspect of North America you could possibly imagine. So the odds are one of those places during any week is probably experiencing something that is uncomfortable for either the players or the fans at those venues. So it's all potentially there.
Not to speak it into existence, but we are what, 3 days in now to Atlantic hurricane season, and while El Nino is expected for a below average season, doesn't mean it's a zero season. And we've got what, Miami, Houston, places that could be impacted by inland effects. So yeah, we'll have to see what the forecast does there. Really quick, Caitlin, can you touch on Tom mentioned wildfires, but what about, we know that climate change doesn't stop at borders. So let's say there are wildfires out west, but how could that impact stadiums that are open air in Kansas City or
Yeah.
anywhere on the East Coast?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that people tend to forget is that you may not live in a place that gets a lot of wildfires, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be impacted by them specifically because of smoke, right? So smoke can travel really, really far, go to a completely different other countries. And depending on the topography where you live, it can linger and cause like serious health problems for a while. So it's not something that can just be easily refreshed in some places. It is something that people do have to be aware of for sure.
Uh, Very quickly, I want to get this question in and maybe like one or two if we can squeeze them in. But what about officials? And this is for anybody, right? So they're running up and down the pitch for a long time as well. And they're also being impacted by this heat. Does that come into play or into your mind about just the sharpness of the play calling that could go along in the most extreme heat?
I can address that, I guess, briefly. Like, yeah, I do think so. I, for the first time, I have to say recently, and I don't remember which game I was watching, but I saw an official have to be substituted. The center referee had to be substituted, and the fourth official had to step in and take the rest of the match. And it wasn't really clear. It looked like a muscle injury. That was the first time I ever seen anything like that, um, and so I just thought of that when you asked that question, and absolutely, like those assistant referees and the center referee, they're covering a lot of distance, and they have to be, um, you know, fit. and their job will require physical performance that can be impaired by heat as well. So that's a good question and something that now that it's been asked, I'm going to look out for that in the World Cup as well.
Okay, so I think the last question from the Q&A box, and then I've got a very brief one after that. But is there anything you'd like, whether it's FIFA, the World Cup, or just the game itself, organizers of football and soccer across the world, is there anything that they, maybe in your purview, could do better to ensure player safety during extreme heat events? Maybe anything you'd like to see put into practice that players are already maybe doing to combat that heat?
I think that's kind of a difficult question because I do to some extent think that they are trying, but they're like kind of reactive solutions, like having ice chests on benches and, implementing the water breaks. But I feel like what actually needs to be done is like have more of these conversations, acknowledge, that there is heat and it does impair performance, and then try to be proactive in ways that we can mitigate continuous climate, like effects of climate change. That's ultimately how we, um, can stop having such crazy heat events. But I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I think that having the conversations and acknowledging that, heat, among other things, is impacting performance is step one.
Look, I've said it so many times, and I'll say it so many more times in my life, but a lot of times people ask us, what can we do about climate change? Like, what is the solution? Conversations, communication, that is a solution. So I'm glad you brought that up. Alex?
Yeah, the other thing I would like to see, and I think you mentioned FIFA in the question. FIFA's the governing body for football around the world, and I would like to see leadership from them on climate mitigation, like Jazz said, proactive climate mitigation, not reactive, as she said. So, um, that could look like providing funds for football federations for countries around the world to make to change the game and stadiums and how they're equipped and how they source electricity and what they do with waste and all these things that can potentially address emissions in countries around the planet. I would love to see leadership from FIFA to get as much as we can now. And we're not really getting ahead of it anymore, but to mitigate.
Okay, so very last question. We've got 2 minutes left. I just want to know, to end this on maybe like we've talked a lot about heavy things today, like climate change and the data that comes with it. Each and every one of you, what are you most excited about for the next, 8 weeks or so? Tom, you go first.
Oh, sure. There's so many games. It's gonna be the best thing. Every day has got so many games. And the one thing I love is I want to love watching all the games, but I love watching YouTube. I love watching like late winners, and I love then watching like YouTube reactions of people in their home countries reacting to the winners, and that's always my favorite thing. Like watching like the when the World Cup finals were happening last time. So I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, hoping the U.S. does really, really well. My second team I always root for are the Dutch, because I always want them to. I want them to win one finally. So if it won't be the U.S., I'm happy to root for the Dutch. But just really excited to see some world-class soccer being played across North America.
Anybody else?
I don't, I will admit I don't ever usually, I've never watched World Cup, but I'm excited to see my colleagues so excited for the next couple of months because I get to kind of like, it's like that contagion, that mood contagion where I get really excited because you guys are really excited. So I'm really excited for that.
Jazz or Alex, anything you want to add?
I think mine is similar to Tom's. I just like I love seeing everybody come out and represent their country and just like infuse their culture into the support of the game. It's incredible, and it's exciting that it's going to be like close by. I'm like right in the New York, New Jersey area, so like miles from the stadium. So I'm like, come on, just past my neighborhood, bring it all through.
Two things. I was rooting for Jamaica to qualify as I was there, and that sadly did not happen. So my other dark horse favorite is Haiti to having qualified for their first ever World Cup. So I'm rooting for them, excited to see them on that biggest stage. And as Jazz and Tom mentioned, like people coming out to come together, specifically the watch parties. I don't know if I'll make it to any games personally, but watch parties are one of the best parts about the World Cup.
I will say very quickly with both of Tom and Alex, you hit on two things. One, the 2016 World Cup, I took a trip to Chicago and it was about to storm. So I walked into the first place that was open, which was a bar, and everybody was there to support the Dutch. And they're like, "Who are you here for?" And I was like, "Who are you here for?" Everyone's in orange, so obviously. And it was so much fun. But to Alex, what you said, I watched one of the Team USA matches in Millennium Park with like just so many people around us, and it was so much fun. So I'm looking forward to that as well. All right, Jasmine Spencer, Alex Jacobs, Tom DiLiberto, and Caitlin Trudeau, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody else, thank you all for joining us as well. We'll be following up with a recording soon, as well as the links and the resources via email. Again, everything you saw today, everything you heard today is available for your reporting. And as a reminder, if you haven't signed up, you can sign up for Climate Matters. It is our weekly reporting package that arrives via email in your inbox every single Wednesday. It includes ready-to-use data, visuals, scientific summaries, and other resources on timely climate-related topics. If you have any questions or you want some clarification, or maybe you're looking for additional quotes, you can reach out to us, and we are happy to help you with that reporting and storytelling. A quick note, we'll be sending out updates, as Tom mentioned, each and every week to put the games that have the greatest heat influence by climate change on your radar for the reporting, for your content, for pre-game information. If you'd like to get on that email list, you can email Abby Vitch, or you can email, or the email address is in the chat there for you, or you can find it on that interactive World Cup Hub tool that we have online as well. As we wrap up, a short survey will pop up on your screen. We really appreciate if you could take a few minutes to answer the questions. This program is a product of your feedback, shaping topics for future webinars and other climate matters. So we want to make sure that we have the most effective resources that are useful for you. Again, thanks again for being here. We are excited for the next few weeks as the world watches this beautiful game on the biggest stage right here in North America. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll catch you back here on the next one. Everybody have a great day.